Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. I am your host, Adam Portrais, and I'm joined by Sean Keenan.
Heidi's with Bill.
And, of course, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear created by Bruce Leslie with Dick Gunfighter.
Do they both better properly get their credits in there, man?
Well, he gets a with, not an and, which maybe we can talk about that later.
We can, actually. I have a little bit of, I don't want to say standing. I read a book, and they kind of explained some stuff, so maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. But today's movie, everybody, is called Batman and Bill. Now, I know some of you are going, What is that? That's not your regular Batman type of movie. No, this one is on Netflix, or excuse me, Hulu rather. One of them streaming services. It's on Hulu right now. And this is a documentary, and we'll get into, kind of who's responsible for Batman. Who's responsible for this Batman? And it ain't the guy you might think. So
it's Joe Chill.
It's Joe Chill as well. He's not wrong, that Bruce Leslie. He's a smarty, I tell you.
I thought it was Jack Napier.
I love when people almost think does that really happen that much? I mean, honestly.
No.
No, not amongst the real nerds. Just people that have seen the Batman movie, and that's it.
But I'm sure from 1989 to 1994, there were several comics that used the name Jack Napier instead of Joe Chill because it was just such a phenomenon.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, there was also that Batman novel that came out that was all short. They were all short stories, and they kept talking about Jack Napier was a big part of those.
Yeah.
I tell you, those guys are just reeling in it, man. Just making stuff up, and it comes in the real world. I hate it. I don't know how that works.
Just like a writer.
Just like a writer.
Making stuff up.
It's
not real.
What was it? The documentary and the events occurred in real time. We all know that. I
love that, man. You're on the same page as me, I think, for this one, Adam.
So we have, first of all, thank you guys so much. The downloads for the Guardians of the Galaxy episode, I thought were going to be good. They were phenomenal. Thank you guys so much. And if you're sticking on, man, thanks for joining and continuing to listen to us. I swear we try to be as entertaining as we can.
And just on an aside note, I read this book that was almost identical to Guardians of the Galaxy, only in a better way if people like it. So they might want to, I don't know who wrote it, but it's called Chubby Wizard, Wrath of the Manticore. Folks that like Guardians might want to check that out.
You wait till the end of the show for your plugs. We got to get through this hour of crap before you start talking about your little jaunts off into the world of fiction. Whatever the heck it is that you do. This is actually the continuation, of course, of Patreon month. I was going to say supporter month, but really it's the people that go over to patreon.com/HMP and, just donate even $1 because everybody who has donated is in this here hat, and I'm going to draw another name. And honestly, up until this very second, I forgot what we wanted to give away. Do we have anything? Maybe a T-shirt. What do you think?
Sure,
T-shirt.
Man.
I don't know.
I've got plenty of T-shirts. Some of them I've even washed recently.
You got any of those? I won't reference that. That's not in our category here for iTunes. I was like, remember those shirts that you used to see at the beach all the time? That's all I'll say. Let's move on.
Did they involve a Mr. Johnson?
There was one of those. All right, somebody got it. I'll take it.
Got a really sweet Varney shirt.
All right, so the HMP hat is full of fun stuff here. We're going to send a T-shirt out to whomever I draw on this bad boy. By the way, the other two guys that have won the last 2 weeks, you need to contact me so I can get you your stuff, bro.
Especially the person who gets to pick the show.
Yeah, Gorga Campy, could you get on the line here, player? I gotta make sure that this can happen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right, so we have drawn out a name, and I shall unfurl it. Bill Hegberg. Bill, thank you, sir. You have won yourself an HMP T-shirt. Send us your shirt size there, and, of course, address to heromoviepodcast@gmail.com. And we'll get that off to you as soon as we can here, assuming people that win things actually want to get them. Anyways. That's how we're kind of doing around here. Well, we do, of course, have, after big shows, we tend to also get a good flux of emails and everything. So let's go ahead and open up the HMP email.
Bale's here.
Oh boy, oh boy. We got a slew of things. I don't know that we'll have time to read all of them per se, but we're going to get around to a couple of them here. This one's a long one, so Adam no ready, and yet the author of this knows this, so this is at your own peril, buddy boy. It's entitled Guardians Volume 2 Review, contains spoilers. So again, if you haven't seen it, what world are you living in that you haven't seen Guardians 2 at this point? But spoilers from here on out. And this one is from our good friend, Marty. Hey guys, just listened to your Guardians Volume 2 review, and you happen to touch on a subject very close to my heart. Families, especially dads. To say that on Mother's Day, Martin, how dare you? Now, although I think of Sean as my handsome, as young, handsomer brother, Bruce as the bookworm brother, and Adam is the kind of brother who would punch you in the arm and then deny it. I want to talk about my family closer to home. Man, Guardians of the Two hit me with the feels. As a kid, my parents divorced, but instead of an a-hole stepdad, I got a great man as well as a great biological dad who's always been there too. Between them, I think that they taught me how to be the best son I can. Then when I had kids of my own, I tried to be the best dad that I can. You'll have to ask my co-host of HMP UK how I'm doing. So I'm a sucker for stories involving fathers. I can barely make it through any listening of the song Cats in the Cradle, and Mrs. Doubtfire gets me every time.
Mrs. Doubtfire.
Marty, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to say this as a 35-year-old man. Miss Doubtfire make me cry too, baby. Don't worry. It's all good. I get that. But it's weird. As Bruce said, this film seemed to have been made for a focus group of one, me. The music took me back to my childhood, listening to vinyl on my dad's record player or 8-track in my other dad's car. What a fantastic way to stir emotions, and then for Peter not to realize what was in front of him the whole time with Yondu. Even though that smile at the end of Guardians Volume 1, where he finds out the orb was switched, shows he loves that Terran boy. So the most long-winded email you've probably received, correct, in which I'm with Adam on this one. When Yondu died, I was weeping, but when all of the Ravager ships showed up to give him a proper send-off and honor him, I was sobbing. Damn you, James Gunn. You made me laugh again in the middle of my heartbreak. So for me, it's a Dick Grayson 2. And by the way, happy 3rd-year anniversary. Looking forward to the next 3. And he signs it, I'm Marty Merrick, y'all.
Look, Marty, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it was wrong to cry at that movie. I am saying that I am incapable of doing that. I was not equipped with the software in order to do that. It's totally good that you feel that way.
When Sean's children were born, he was just like, "Oh, good."
And for the record, I want people to know that I only cried during the Ugly Kid Joe version of Cats in the Cradle.
Oh,
that's awesome.
Ugly Kid Joe. When's the last time you thought about that one? We got another one here. This one is from our good friend Matt Schnapp, long time listener. And it's entitled Quick Hits. Number 1, Guardians was awesome. Baby Groot was awesome. Yondu was super awesome, especially since my wife and I are trying to become licensed foster parents. How about that? Number 2, I was thinking about movies that I would have suggested had I had the opportunity. This is about the Patreon, by the way, that we gave away a movie last week. My name didn't get drawn, but I'll give them to you anyway, so you can make fun of me. Thunderpants.
Oh, I like this already.
Oh, my.
Not comic book related, but the main character is arguably a superhero. Condor Man, made for TV Disney movie about a comic book artist.
Yep.
This next one we've mentioned off air, Todd McFarlane's Spawn, the 1997 HBO series. Evangelion 1.11, you are, in parentheses, not alone. Must be seen to be believed. I've heard people say good things about those. I don't know.
Hey, it involves a lot of Japanese words. I don't know if I'm up for it.
If you want Bruce reading Japanese words, maybe that'll be in a... See, and this is why I love these, because these will always help during the regular you guys pick the movie. So I appreciate all these off-the-wall things. Number 3, thoughts on the Wonder Woman trailer. I've avoided most DC movies because they look joyless and dour, but Wonder Woman looks badass. I haven't seen the latest Wonder Woman trailer myself. The others that I've kind of liked and stuff, but I'm trying to stay away from as much as possible just in case they, happen to spoil something. So that's me. I don't know about you guys.
I saw the trailer before that King Arthur movie. They showed a Wonder Woman trailer. It looked good.
That's probably the new one, more than likely, since that's a new release.
Yeah.
I've only seen the first one, and I won't watch another one.
You're smart to do that.
Yeah.
Number 4, thoughts on the Thor Ragnarok trailer. I think the Thor movies have consistently been the weakest in the MCU movies, but Ragnarok, much like Wonder Woman, looks badass. I agree with that. I've never been so excited for a Thor movie, and I really think that this may change the direction of that character in probably the best way to really have people glom onto him, because I don't think they quite have as of yet. That's just me.
And even if I saw nothing other than the graphic design of the movie title that they have in that trailer, I think I'd be sold just on that alone. It really makes me think that a Rush album is going to be attached to it.
And they seem to be leaning into the fact that Thor is a little bit goofy, and they need to do that. Mm-hmm. And it looks great.
Well, that's the thing. When you look back at all, but they've all had somewhat of a humor to them. But man, if you lean into it, I think that's really going to be where it can take off. And it is. It's just
that's your bread and butter.
Meow meow, for crying out loud. And rounding it up here, number 5. It may come to a shock to you, but yours are not the only podcasts I listen to. I honestly,
shut up.
I thought about stopping reading right there.
Shut your mouth. Shut it.
Yours are, however, the only ones that consistently feed my nerdy, attention-starved, rambling emails. I'm torn between telling you not to encourage me and not ruining a good thing. Thanks and keep up the good work, but seriously, don't encourage me, Matt. Matt, thanks for the email, buddy. And thank you for your patronage.
Ira Glass.
Yeah, Ira Glass can, do what he does.
Chug it.
Perfect.
Chug it, Ira Glass. Chug it.
I didn't like when he said that to me. It made me feel bad. It's good, Ira Glass. I think this will be the last one here. This one's from our serial guy, Matt. Matt, I love you so much, but he's okay. Hey guys, I want to say after finally I finally was able to find pics of you guys online. See, he's getting into stalker territory here. And,
oh no,
this is First of all, yes, Sean, you are quite handsome. As a totally straight married man, I'm comfortable enough to say that if I were a lady, I would indeed hit that. LOL. Fair enough.
Yikes.
It gets, yeah. Bruce, wear that wizard cape all the time because it only adds to your wise-looking aesthetic.
I love it, man.
I hate this part, but you're going to love it.
Oh, no.
Adam, my man, you look as I had imagined. Oh, God. The totally normal dude that obviously carries a torch for all things that we've come to this podcast for. That's not an insult. That's in all caps. You genuinely have that gleam in your eye that communicates to me, I love this stuff and I will never apologize for it, nor should you, good sir. You guys are doing God's work. I can't get enough of the nerd talk. For example, I listened to 8 straight hours of you guys at work yesterday and still wanted more. HMP for life. Thanks for the joy and laughter, Matt from Florida, or as Sean said previously, buddy. Matt, thanks for all the emails. I do read them all. Yeah, and he may show up at DragonCon this year, Matt says. So we shall see.
Hey, look for a middle-aged guy in a blue wizard robe. That might be me.
You never know. All right, I'm moving on.
Now, I've got this thing. When I'm in public, I deny I'm who I am. So if you meet that guy and he acts like he doesn't know what you're talking about, just persist.
It's what Mom always liked to call lean in on it. Just kind of get in there and let them know what's really there. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and close up the old mailbag.
Bale's here.
And, of course, if you'd like to send us an email, you can go ahead and email us at heromoviepodcast@gmail.com. That is it, gentlemen. With no further delay, let's go ahead and listen to the trailer for Batman and Bill.
This story for me was uncovering a big superhero secret. Bob Kane is the man who has been credited on Batman for most of Batman's history.
When you open a comic book, there it says created by Bob Kane. When you see the movies, it says created by Bob Kane. Correcting that is something that terrified everybody, I think, for decades.
Bill Finger was the dominant creative force of Batman, Robin, the Joker, Catwoman, the Riddler, the Penguin, the Scarecrow, Commissioner Gordon, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson, and Gotham City.
I know Bob's trying to take credit for everything. Everything you would think is good, that's Bill.
So how could this not have been so well known?
I was a ghost. I really was.
Bob Kane did not want Bill Finger's story told and took tremendous offense at it.
Bill was Batman's secret identity. It became a crusade, getting Bill's name on Batman. Superheroes are not doing this to get paid or praised. They are doing something for the greater good, then they disappear into the night. Without Bill, there'd be no Batman. So what happened to Bill Finger?
All right, that was a trailer for Batman and Bill, our new release of this week, of course, available on Hulu. Here's the IMDb plotline. Simple enough. Documentary about the uncredited co-author of Batman, Bill Finger. This is directed by Don Argott, sure, and Sheena Joyce. Bruce, this is going to be an interesting one, my friend, because what I've kind of thought about here is like, we do a lot of comic book connections, but usually they're like, go back to the source material. This is going beyond source material, so I can't wait to hear what the comic book connection is this week.
Well, let's see here. Uh-oh, let me pull this up. I was looking at one other thing. But let's talk about a couple of moderately but not memorably successful comic strips from the 1930s. One was called Rusty, and the other was called Clip Carson. They were drawn by Bob Kane and his newly established studio. Bob Kane established his studio because he was fed up with working at Max Fleischer's studio, where the animation was done by an assembly line of anonymous artists, and Max Fleischer took all the credit. It just wasn't fair for the hard work of people like Bob Kane and the lesser artist, at least in Kane's opinion, who sat next to him to work without a byline. By the way, that lesser-known artist was named Jacob Kurtzberg. Is that ringing any bells, guys?
He was an Olympian in '78, right?
Well, Jacob Kurtzberg is a household name these days because later on he changed it to Jack Kirby. But that's a bitter discussion for another day. Anyway, Kane didn't think it was fair for someone else to get the credit for his work. So he started his own company, and he drew Rusty as well as Clip Carson. Now, he quickly realized that he had a problem. Sure, he could draw as well as any high school sophomore, but he had no freaking idea how to tell a story. So he hired a guy to ghostwrite the strips. And, of course, we know who that guy was. That guy was Milton Finger, better known to the masses as Bill Finger. Now, Kane didn't just give his writer the finger. See what I did there with Batman? What? Kane didn't just give his writer the finger with Batman. He never did get the credit he deserves for Rusty or Clip Carson. Now, where's the documentary demanding Finger gets his due for Rusty? I mean, look around at all the Rusty movies, all the Clip Carson video games on Steam. I say we start our own campaign demanding Finger get credit for always and forever for co-creating Clip Carson. Are you guys with me?
Patreon.com/HMP.
Well, let's talk about credit. Now, the guy that made this movie, what was the name of the guy that made this movie, Adam? We see on screen.
The gentleman, I believe Thomas Andrew. Is that the guy?
Okay, because
I don't have any of the.
Thomas Andrade is the guy that wrote the book with Bill Finger. I think Mark Nobleman is the man we see on screen.
Mark Tyler Nobleman. There we go. It didn't have a picture.
You said
on
another
IMDb.
name at the beginning, so I was worried I had his name wrong. But Mark Nobleman kind of wants us to think that nobody knew who Bill Finger was until he set about his one-man crusade of bringing justice to Finger and the Finger family. Now, in 1940, when Green Lantern was introduced to the world, it was with the byline created by Bill Finger and Martin Odell. In 1942, when one of my personal favorites, Wildcat, was introduced, it was created by Bill Finger and Erwin Hassan. In 1994, 2 people were inducted into the Jack Kirby Hall of Fame. This is 1994. Now, how about that? Kirby came up again. I guess that shows Kane something. Maybe there was something to that guy. But anyway, of course, those 2 people inducted in 1994 were Bill Finger and Bob Kane. And yes, in that order, Finger came first. In 2005, San Diego Comic-Con, now known as Comic-Con International, began giving an award for the most outstanding writer in comics. The name of that award? The Bill Finger Award. All of these things have something in common. They all happened way before Mark Nobleman began his crusade to get recognition for Bill Finger. Now, don't get me wrong. Bill Finger seriously got screwed over by Bob Kane, and really, when it comes down to it, by national publications, DC Comics, and Warner Brothers Entertainment. But he was far from anonymous, ignored, or unloved. Gerard Jones wrote a great book in 2004 called Men of Tomorrow, Geeks, Gangsters, and the Birth of the Comic Book that lays out Bill Finger's story beautifully and reverently, and strangely enough, it does so without trying to make Gerard Jones the hero of Bill Finger's story. Now, certified fireball and real-life living comic book character, as well as comic legend Jim Steranko, whose autographed picture I'm looking at as we record, has told the story famously and often of the time he popped Bob Kane in the face and said that was for Bill Finger. Now, Bob Kane was a lot bigger than Jim Steranko. I've met Steranko, I've spoken with Steranko, and I absolutely believe that he wouldn't hesitate to pop a much larger man. Yeah. Heck, Chris Elvins is larger than Steranko, and for a moment I thought the 80-year-old Spitfire was going to pop Chris in the face. You guys were there.
Those Canadians wrestle people up. There ain't no doubt about that.
You would be hard-pressed to find someone who loved comics in the past 20 years who didn't have absolute love and adoration for Bill Finger. Bill Finger has been my favorite soapbox to climb on for so long that people who know me are afraid to even say the word finger around me. I love Bill Finger. The living legends of comics love Bill Finger. Thousands of comic book fans and hundreds of comic book historians love Bill Finger. Why do we love Bill Finger? Because he was incredibly talented and created things that make us happy. We don't, however, love him because Mark Nobleman discovered some hidden secret and opened our eyes to his radical discovery. Bill Finger is a man who deserves any praise, credit, or financial considerations that the world could give him. I honestly feel like Nobleman has exploited the man's memory for his own profit and aggrandizement in a way not dissimilar to Bob Kane. You want to know some of the important parts left out of this movie? Just ask me. I'm a real fan of the greatest Golden Age writer, Bill Finger.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah?
Did you think this was going to take this turn at all?
I did. I knew that that's where he was going because Bill Finger is, you know, I mean, everybody who knows comics knows who Bill Finger is.
This is true. I mean, and that's the one thing that you got to go and give to this movie is that it does make out, you know, the main guy is like he's a
complete unknown.
Yeah,
and,
like
here's the thing with this movie, Bruce, is that the beginning of this movie is far more interesting than the second half of this movie, and the reason why that is because there wasn't much story there. You know, they had to make an 1.5 hour long documentary, and they didn't have it. So they made Mark Tyler Nobleman the main character for the second half of this movie, and it also drags because of it.
You know why they didn't have more material for the documentary to make the first half last longer? It's because they probably had to ask no less than 30,000 people at a con before they found 3 who didn't know who Bill Finger was. Like, I want to see all the outtakes of everybody that knew exactly what Bill Finger was and who Bill Finger was, and probably told Nobleman things he had not discovered in his extensive research. You know, that really irked me when he's going to first off, you don't put the fans at a con on the spot for not knowing something, you know. And then second off, I know that for every person who didn't know Bill Finger, there were 10 people there who do.
Right. You know, if I know who Bill Finger is, because I'm a casual comic book fan. You know, I can tell you the highlights. I can tell you the giants of the industry. I can't go into third tier people. I don't know them. And Bill Finger is certainly not a third tier person. I think that Roy Thomas said it right. Like, Roy Thomas got it correct in this movie, because when you work in a creative industry, you kind of run into 2 types of people. You run into the money people and you run into the creatives. And Bill Finger was creative, you know, which means that the money aspect of his life fell to the wayside so that he could be more creative, really. And Bob Kane absolutely and utterly screwed him for that. That is the narrative that this movie is trying to tell you, and is correct. That's the one narrative of this movie that's correct. The second half of this, because they don't have it, they don't have the rest of it, they don't have the fact that, you know, if they know Bill Finger's name in the 60s, We certainly know more about comic book creators now.
Yeah.
So the fact that they know his name in the 60s should tell you right away, oh, he is a giant in the industry, and even casual comic book fans know who he is.
Never once did this documentary mention that he's the co-creator, fully credited, of Green Lantern. Now, I know that Green Lantern is not Batman, but Green Lantern is not a small deal.
No, not at all. And, you know, the other aspect to this, too, is that they kind of fudge the timeline, too, because they make it sound like, you know, he did that Mark Tyler Nobleman's been working on this for 10 years, which he probably has. But, you know, that book was done years and years and years ago. You know, this documentary was made last year.
Yeah.
So, you know, to make it sound like he's just had this like nonstop, tireless crusade that no one is picking up the mantle of until the dawn of social media is disingenuous. It's just totally false.
And, you know, he paints it, you know, a lot of successful documentarians fall into this trap. And I'm not going to call Mark Nobleman a successful documentarian, but I'm sure he aspires to be. But they fall into this trap where it's, you know, they want me to believe that he's doing this for Athena Finger. They want me to believe that he's doing it for Bill Finger. But then, you know, the TED Talks are for Bill Finger. But then I happen to see, you know, he's selling a lot of those books. You know, I'm sure that he didn't give this at Hulu for cost, you know. It just starts to sort of grind away at you, you know. It's like the old trope of people, you know, Michael Moore talking about how awful rich people are without mentioning what his own bank account is, you know, that kind of thing.
Well, you know, so let's break this down, okay? So the first bad thing that happens is, without a doubt, it's Bob Kane, right? Bob Kane did nothing to try to support Bill Finger in the beginning of all this.
Do you want to talk about it? Because,
yes,
you know, there's the very interesting part of the story that this doesn't tell. And, you know, I don't know how much people really enjoy the historical component to it. But to me, the social, you know, I call myself an amateur comic book historian, and I like this kind of story behind the story. The first mega super hit superhero comic book was Superman. The second one was Batman. Mm-hmm. We all know what happened once Superman became a hit between Siegel and Schuster and National Publications, don't we?
Right.
I mean, you know, Siegel and Schuster immediately are going to court. They're really trying to demand rights. They're getting a little bit of money at a time, but they're never getting the big nut that they want. And I mean, this has been going on as recently as like 2009. This whole Siegel and Schuster family estate versus Warner Brothers has been ongoing for quite some time. Now, the second big comic book breakout star superhero was Batman. So with all this trouble with Siegel and Schuster, DC did a couple of things. Number one, they quit listing creators of characters in comics with one exception. And that was, well, two exceptions. That was Wonder Woman, created by Charles Moulton Marston, who I've probably got his name wrong there. It's like he had a pen name and a real name, and they're both kind of alike, and I amalgamate them. But that's the Wonder Woman creator. If she ever goes out of print, that estate actually gets those rights back. That's why there'll always be a Wonder Woman comic book every month. And then also Bob Kane got his name listed as a creator in perpetuity because he signed over all rights to DC. He said, I just want my name stuck on here because I want the fame, and I will give all rights. So a lot of the money that Bob Kane made off of Batman was not necessarily from National Publications, but it was from being the creator of Batman and side project. You know, he sells his ugly pastel paintings because he's Bob Kane, creator of Batman. It's something that he was kind of ashamed of, because even in this movie, there's interview footage where they said, did you sell the rights to Batman? And he won't answer it. He won't give it an honest answer because he's ashamed of the fact that he actually doesn't have any legal financial rights to Batman. Now, the problem is, if at any point this contract selling the rights to DC in perpetuity, there were National Publications at the time, the problem with this contract is if DC ever gave Bill Finger part of that credit, that would nullify that original contract. So not only would they have to worry about the Siegel and Schuster thing all over again with potentially Bill Finger's estate, but then Bob Kane's estate can get back in on this because that original contract is nullified because it was an invalid contract because not everyone who had a right to ownership was represented. So DC, you know, National Publications became DC, got bought by Warner Brothers. That whole organization, they're most valuable because don't don't make any mistakes. As much as they have spent in legal fees over Superman, Batman is the most valuable character DC has ever had and ever will have. So all the headaches that they've had to deal with the Siegel and Schuster families, in their opinion, those headaches are going to be at least threefold, if not fivefold, if Batman comes into court. And the only thing protecting them is they got something from Bob Kane that they never got from Siegel and Schuster, and that was a clear-cut contract that said Bob Kane created this character. He sells the rights to DC in perpetuity as long as they always say created by Bob Kane and only by Bob Kane. So they would nullify that whole contract if they ever went back and added created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. You'll notice they've never put that "and" in there.
Right.
I think that's been interesting because it really it shows.
I'm sorry, but
character.
that guy didn't mention any of this, did he? I mean, he didn't talk about the reason, the fire in the bottle. There's the Superman headache. There's Bob Kane trying to get his. There's DC. I mean, he didn't even mention the actual sort of legal, political, business atmosphere around what caused it. Bob Kane was a jerk about it, but it wasn't really just Bob Kane being a jerk. It was also DC being a jerk.
Yeah. It's weird that the narrative that this movie takes is that it's all basically on Bob Kane and none of it is on Warner Brothers. Because that's basically the narrative of this, is that Bob Kane is the big evil supervillain, which he was awful. I mean, make no mistake about it.
Yeah.
Bob Kane's awful. Awful.
But he did when he saw his own mortality approaching, he did try to redeem himself a little bit. Once he realized he didn't need the money anymore because he's going to die soon, he did want to get into heaven and buy his way by telling the truth.
But it was only a half measure, Bruce. Like he didn't fork over it. Like, oh, and by the way, Bill Finger also came up with the concept for the costume and named it Gotham and came up with the concept for the Joker and blah 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 blah.
It was
blah.
all kind of like, well, he had a little something to do with it.
He just said he was a major contributor, and that's all he said.
Yeah, and he also, I mean, the most supervillain thing he did was that totally, we all know that that's a bogus sketch because, first off, I drew pictures when I was 13. I could not find those pictures when I was 13 now, much less when I'm 80 years old. And also, when I drew pictures when I was 13, I didn't go out of my way to very clearly date them. And
that's just complete and utter crap.
Yeah.
I never did it like an actual date, but when I would draw all through, my middle school and high school years, I would put the year in there that I drew it. But the actual date, I think I've only done that maybe a couple times, but that's also usually when you're a lot younger, at least for me it was. But I mean, I could still
picture, that original concept drawing of Batman in the red exists physically. Like if he really drew that picture when he was 13, why did he go screw it all up and then go back to it?
Yeah. Well, that's where it all falls apart. But I mean, as far as like keeping stuff, I mean, I still got now. Granted, I'm only 35, but I've got stuff from when I was 12, 13 of drawing and stuff. So it's not impossible, but. You have the better answer there, which was why did you change it to crappy stuff? Why did Bill have to change all of your crap if you quote unquote already had it? Shut up, dude.
And I really feel like a lot of the punches were pulled on Warner Brothers and Warner Brothers executives. And
that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is that it takes such a weird narrative, this documentary, where yes, Bob
owns
Kane
Hulu?
Bob
Who owns Hulu?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Because I think just like Comcast own Time Warner, AOL now, like stuff is all so merged to there's like 3 entertainment companies out there. Does Warner Brothers have a stake in Hulu? Because I feel like they do.
Does Warner Brothers?
I think Comcast owns Hulu, and I don't know if there's a connection between Comcast or Warner Brothers, but I just kind of wonder some of these things. Plus, a guy who's trying to sell a movie might want to pull punches on a movie studio.
Yeah,
well, that happens all the time. That happens in just regular old-fashioned news, where I mean, not for nothing, but John Oliver did a thing on net neutrality. Guess which station that which television conglomerate he left out? Time Warner.
Yeah,
because they own HBO, so of course leave them out of the conversation. This kind of stuff happens all the time.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the point. A lot of punches are pulled on what to me is the real important part of the story, and that's the legal maneuver that happened in 1940 or so that caused all this problem, and why Warner Brothers was so dead set against ever. This makes it sound like all they had to do is say, you know what, we're going to add an extra name in the credits and everybody's happy. But that is not what's involved.
Well, of course not. There's a lot of where am I going with this? So, because I keep wanting to go back to Bob Kane here, Bruce, to be honest with you.
Please go. I can talk negatively about him for quite a while.
Because, he had the opportunity in the 60s to at least publicly say, basically do what Stan Lee did in the 70s with Spider-Man. Where, because Stan Lee was constantly saying that he was the only creator of Spider-Man until, around the TV show, right? Around the 70s TV show miniseries.
They put me in a headlock and then noogied me until I said, okay, fine.
And then Stan Lee came clean. But the same thing can't be said with Bob Kane. When that 60s TV show came out, he had the opportunity to be able to say, hey, look, Bill Finger actually did help with all of this as well. And instead he doubled down. Instead of Stan Lee has his own problems, but at least he did come clean that Ditko is co-creator of Spider-Man. Whereas Kane literally doubles down and produces that stupid drawing that we're talking about. And then on top of that does that pop lithograph stuff where he's hiring artists to come in and do these awful garish paintings of Batman and then signing his name to it. Yeah,
and that says a lot about who Bob Kane is. Like, not only can he not write, but he can't really draw either. I mean, he gets sole credit for creating the Joker for years when Jerry Robinson drew him and Bill Finger came up with the idea. Right. Bob Kane gets the credit. It's like work for hire. I mean, it's honestly, anything that happens in Batman is going to be given credit to Bob Kane until modern sensibilities take over. But a couple of key differences with the Stan Lee thing, too, and the Bob Kane thing. Stan Lee got that celebrity that Bob Kane wanted and never quite got. Right. And even in the 70s, Stan Lee had gotten the celebrity. It's nothing like he has now, but even in the 70s, Stan Lee was getting a lot more. I mean, he had a stupid little talk show. He got a lot more than Bob Kane ever got. It's Stan Lee show interviewing Bob Kane, not the Bob Kane show interviewing Stan Lee, Sure.
Well, the other part, too, is that Stan Lee is actually an interesting human being. Stan Lee, there's something dopey and fun about Stan Lee, even in the 70s where – and even in the 80s when he's doing all the voiceover work for all those cartoons where it's like, hey, true believers, it's the Hulk.
Yeah. That kind of thing. It's quite frankly a difference between Golden Age and Silver Age.
Yeah, it really is. And Bob Kane has that like slimy, like, well, of course I did what he'd say, like almost like Robert Goulet.
And, when Bob Kane screwed over Bill Finger, he was like 20 years old. I mean, he was not an old person. So there's a part of him that he had to probably lie to himself to believe it to a degree.
Sure.
Whereas Stan Lee absolutely knew what he was doing when he screwed people over. So sometimes that makes it a little easier to own up to it than when you have made yourself. I mean, there are things that I probably remember being the way they were when I was 19 that absolutely are not that way. But I believe it firmly now that I'm 40-something. Imagine when I'm 60-something, 70-something.
Oh, my God, you'll be completely unreasonable.
Now,
I'll be telling people that I'm Bill Finger by then.
I'll say this. When I worked in television, I did get to meet Robert Goulet, and let me tell you something. Gem of a human being.
Don't doubt it.
Gem of a human being.
Oh, man, I love that Donkey Shane song of his.
That was a nice dude right there.
I saw Neil Diamond last weekend, and he is also a consummate professional.
Well, speaking of consummate professionals, I want to get back on not putting the proper people on blast, because they start talking about the Tim Burton Batman movie and talking about how it was just awful that Bill Finger didn't get a credit for it. And I don't know if these interviews, if the way it's framed, like maybe it was a different question being asked, but the answer is made to frame like it was in reference to the Tim Burton Batman movie. But one of the people saying that it's just awful Bill Finger didn't get the credit he deserved, and they're showing it during the Tim Burton Batman movie part, is Michael Uslan. And he never really mentions why Michael Uslan is important in Batman, but Michael Uslan is the guy that bought the film rights to Batman in the 70s for like a nickel and 2 pop bottles.
Right.
He had 100% say over whether or not that Tim Burton movie got made. He could have pulled the Roseanne Barr maneuver where he said, if you don't want to give Bill Finger credit for it, that's fine. You just make some movie besides Batman. I'm going to take my rights and just, I don't have to let Warner Brothers make this movie. I mean, he didn't. So he's never put on blast. Like, he's sitting there saying how awful it is, and this guy doesn't call him out. Like, you kind of have this man has made far more money from Batman than Bob Kane ever did.
Oh, without a doubt. Here's the other part too, is that they kind of gloss over the fact that the son during the late 80s tried to sue DC and Warner Brothers to get his dad's name on there. And they kind of just gloss over it like, well, he tried, but it didn't work.
And he almost starts framing it in a way that I feel like he's trying to get us to buy the fact, and I think in the post he realized that he just couldn't sell this, so he made it a little more honest. But the way it's set up, it really starts to change in the second part of the movie. But I think he was really trying to see if he couldn't find an angle where he could convince us that Athena Finger didn't know who her grandfather was until she met this guy. I really felt like he was trying to frame it that way, and you realized he just couldn't pull that off. But a couple of facts that are indisputable. Athena Finger was being invited to Batman events before she ever met Mark Nobleman.
Sure.
The 75th anniversary of Batman came around at a time when the Superman thing had really managed to reach a good agreement. Batman was getting a lot of attention. There was a lot more money in movies than comics at this point. There's the comic book boom. They knew that they really needed to protect their investment. They were going to settle with the Finger family, whether Mark Nobleman ever took up this cause or not. Add to that the fact that Athena Fingerman's half-sister is an attorney. This was going to get settled whether Mark Nobleman ever came around or not, but he really tries to make it sound like he's the reason Finger gets his credit, and that bothers me.
Clearly. I thought it was interesting, but yeah, there's a whole, like, little bit more than a fourth of a movie that's like a completely different movie than what we've gotten in the front half and the back end, We're trying to locate family members. You can make a beautiful, beautiful documentary about Bill Finger and his heirs. You can make an absolutely wonderful movie, and there's enough material to fill. You could do one of those Ken Burns baseball things where it takes like 9 hours or whatever. You could do that on Bill Finger and never, ever have to throw the filmmaker into the story, because there's so much interesting, good stuff to tell there, so much not told here. But he has a few beautiful moments, and I think that this is going to be just this nice tribute that Bill Finger deserves, and I'm really excited. And then it just really takes this hard turn where it starts to seem like it's about Mark Nobleman.
Well, here's the thing, Bruce, is that was what I was trying to say at the beginning of this episode, is that Nobleman didn't make this documentary. Don Argot and Sheena Joyce did. And so what ended up happening, I believe, is that they didn't have a full movie. They needed 90 minutes, and so they started creating their own narrative. And so that is why we got what we got. At the beginning, look, I'm sure that Nobleman had a very heavy hand in all this, for sure. But when you reach the half-hour mark and the Bill Finger part of this is all over, where do you go? So you go with the guy who wrote the book. And so you bring him in and you make his life a much bigger part of this movie. And that's where it starts falling off the rails. Because, yes, Bill Finger did get completely and utterly screwed by Bob Kane and by DC Comics. But then when you start making Mark Nobleman this kind of like grassroots hero, I don't know if that's Nobleman doing that or if that's just Argot and Joyce needing a narrative because they don't have it.
I would love to know more about the nuts and bolts of whose idea it was to make this movie. Who the producer and director are may not have been the genesis for this being made. But what you're telling me is almost like telling me that Super Size Me just decided to follow Morgan Spurlock around and that it wasn't his idea to do that. I mean, that's what.
But Spurlock is the director and producer of that movie, whereas Nobleman is not either one of those things. He did not direct or produce this movie.
I understand what you're saying, but I also just wonder if he didn't pitch this to a director and a producer. Like, here's this Finger story that I made happen.
Right.
Because it is very, very told as if the plot outline for the documentary is written by Nobleman. I mean, it really feels that way. Or else, why do they follow him? And it's his internal thoughts that we get. He's normally when we're getting the voiceover by Michael Moore in a Michael Moore documentary, we're getting this internal dialogue of Nobleman saying, well, I did all I can. Now it's up to the heirs, even though I wish I could do more. It really interjects his voice in a way that doesn't happen organically if you're just interviewing the guy and asking him what he did. I mean, do you think that he brought his own camera crew to Comic-Con and started asking people if they knew who Bill Finger was and just happened to have that footage for the director and producer? Or do you think that was staged for this documentary? And once he's participating in things that are staged specifically for this documentary, he is a creative person for the movie, even if he's not credited as director or producer.
If anything, I
completely agree with that. At some point, I don't know where that line is for this movie, but at some point it's collusion between Nobleman and the director / producers of this. They would need to. They would have to.
I mean, if I wanted to make a documentary about Alan Moore that follows me around talking to people about Alan Moore, and I hire you to direct it and Adam agrees to put up the money to produce it, then I can say, yeah, this Sean guy directed it, this Adam guy produced it. I was just a pawn in their hands. It's not, I mean, I really feel like he pitched this to a director because he knew he couldn't direct it, but it needed to be made. I feel like it's that kind of situation.
Could you imagine the love letter from Bruce to Alan Moore in documentary form?
Well, first of all, it would be an X-rated documentary.
True.
It would involve the Bobbies in Birmingham throwing me in the clink for climbing over the wall too much at his personal residence.
It's me again, Alan!
I brought you shampoo! Because, once a decade at least, pal.
I've got a snake you can worship.
Whoa. You know what I would like to see? I would like to see a documentary now on the people who were interviewed, who were professionals with this movie, and see what they think of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would really like to see that, because I know half the people are dead now. Like Carmen Infantino, he's not alive anymore, is he?
I haven't seen him lately.
Well, he's not down at the 7-Eleven.
I haven't seen like an obituary, but I haven't seen any comments about him either. So I don't know. I'm very bad for thinking people are alive when they're dead, but it's even worse when I think they're dead and they're still alive. So I'm afraid to say anything.
That's true. I would like to hear what Roy Thomas has to say about this movie, because he is interviewed a lot.
Yeah, that's a great one. And Roy Thomas. I don't know. Roy Thomas is one that I feel like has gotten a little short shrift over the years himself, so he probably would identify strongly with Bill Finger, and he would definitely know more about the story than what we're given in this movie. So I'd love to hear his take on it.
I think Roy Thomas is the Stan Musial of comics.
I think that's a great comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Very good for very long, but nobody can ever point to when he was great. Yeah.
When I was a kid, I knew it wasn't true, but I always said that he was brothers with Dave Thomas. I knew it wasn't.
The founder of Wendy's, or Dave Thomas from the Dave Thomas Show?
No, founder of Wendy's. Dave Thomas, founder of Wendy's. I don't know why. It seemed funny to me. I knew it wasn't true, but part of me just wanted it to be, I guess.
You want to talk about another monster? Where's that biography? That guy's a monster.
No, the real monster is Colonel Sanders. I think Dave was probably a really good guy. I think Colonel Sanders was the psychopath.
Yeah, it was Colonel Sanders who set Dave on the path he took.
This is true. We know a lot about fast food.
Fast Food Weekly. You notice the skinny guy doesn't have much to say.
Like, you had Popeyes this week? Well, let me tell you.
But yeah, Michael Uslan, I'm just throwing out this name because it's a recognizable name and he doesn't avoid confrontation. But I could see Michael Moore saying, hey, Michael Uslan, let's sit down and talk about how great Bill Finger is, and leading him on. And all of a sudden he goes, so, why didn't you demand they put his, I need a filmmaker who will make Uslan answer for what he did.
Yeah,
and
but
that kind of thing
Bruce, he was wearing a button. He did everything he could. What else can that guy do? I mean, he was wearing a button.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But he did have a nice button.
Buttons say a lot, man. We don't like to think that they do, but tons.
But I do like the idea, though, man, of maybe if this movie gets some popularity and people start to look, how like when Serial was popular, a lot of podcasts were trying to find another criminal to be their cause celeb, you know what I mean? Or accused criminal, alleged criminal. Well, if this movie catches on, I think I'm going to just for publicity's sake, I'm going to have Dick Gunfighter sue Bruce Leslie, claiming that he really wrote the books. And then when the trial comes up, I'm going to do the old Superman Clark Kent on a double date. You know, I'm going to bring a pair of glasses and try to run in and out of the courtroom. Like 1 minute I'm Bruce Leslie, 1 minute I'm Dick Gunfighter. I'm going to get Adam to stream the whole thing on Facebook Live, you know, in the courtroom. I think we could get 17, 18 viewers if we did that.
17, 18.
Pardon me, Judge. I have to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
It's like, oh, I'm so emotional. I have to vomit. I better run. And, you know, run out of the room, put the glasses back on and come in. Sorry, I was in the bathroom so long. I eat a lot of cheese. I tend to get constipated. Where were we?
Well, it's unorthodox to go back and forth between witnesses like this, but I'll allow it.
I totally want to do the Superman Clark Kent double date lawsuit for publicity's sake.
As we all do.
You know, one of the things that I didn't know how deep the fakeness of this documentary went, but you know, one of the things that I don't talk about a lot is that I have had problems with trademark issues and copyright issues. It's part of my past, and so whenever anything like this comes up at all, like like even just a slight passing, I immediately take creator side. I mean, it's just going to happen.
No question.
It's going to happen instantly with me. Like more so than probably people who, you know, are just right-minded. And so this thing here, this movie here, like immediately, like within 10 minutes of me watching it, because I knew the Bill Finger story, but I didn't know all of the Bill Finger story. And I have even read the quote autobiography unquote of Bob Kane, and I got it just violently angry while watching this movie.
Oh yeah. Now, something else too that I think the movie could have at least wanted us to ask ourselves that it didn't really do, but it could have just even maybe had us ask the question about the ethics of the concept of a ghostwriter even existing.
Right.
You know, because they definitely don't hesitate to make us think, hey, what about this ghost artist? Would you want to buy a painting that all that Bob Kane really did was sign? You know, and there's a lot of art out there that's like that. I'm learning a little bit more about the art world in the last year and a half, and I don't want to go into details, but there are sculptors that hire people in Pakistan to make a sculpture. They bring it to the U.S., enter it into juried competitions, and win first prize. That's God's honest truth, firsthand, hand to God. I know this story. This happens. But the question is, and I know a lot of people make their living being ghostwriters, but there's this ethical question, like there comes a point like you shouldn't even be allowed by law to give away all of your creative rights. Now, you can work for hire and give up any legal claim to future income, but you should at least, the reader should at least have the right to know that there was more than one person involved in this. And you know, there are some people that I really, really tip my hat to. I'm not a big fan of Patterson, you know, the writer, but he gives all of his ghostwriters credit. You know, it's Patterson with this person on all of his ghost written books. And there's some other people that do that too. And I really admire that. But I kind of think this should at least at the end say, you know, should we even allow this whole concept of a ghostwriter to continue or not? Because there's a part of me that, and I know that especially like reality TV, the writing there has to be kind of under wraps. But there's a question of ethics to me. Like, should we even allow this whole concept of a ghostwriter to exist?
Well, I will tell you, Bruce, that it is beneficial, mutually beneficial. Having been a ghostwriter, I've ghostwritten on a couple of things before. It is mutually beneficial to both the ghostwriter and the person who you're ghostwriting for, because what's happening is that you are able to use whatever name or whatever it is to get your work out there, right? And so
but your work's not out there. If you're a ghostwriter, this other guy's work is out there.
Right, but you're not when you're ghostwriting something, you're not putting your best stuff out there. You're a work for hire, and you know that. You don't want to put your own creative into it because you know what's happened in the past. Like hold on, because you know that when, like, let me put it like this, all right? So I have a buddy who used to go ghostwrite for the Sweet Valley High series. He knows going into it, okay, this is the plot that they want. These are the characters that they want for that. He knows that he is not going to make a new character for this because he's going to save that for his own stuff. He is not going to put any any creative effort at all into making that series something more, because it's just not in his best interest. But what is in his best interest is that he's going to make $7,000 for ghostwriting that Sweet Valley High book. And so you get that work out there. It's not your best work. It doesn't need to be your best work, and you've got money in your pocket.
Well, cards on the table.
Yeah.
Bill Finger, in every way, shape, and form, was ghostwriting Batman. Yeah. I still think he deserves the credit. I honestly think your friend deserves the credit for that Sweet Valley High book. I just don't think a person who is desperate will sell their body, sell their cadaver. Like after death, people that really need money would not hesitate to sell their cadaver to science. So we've made it illegal for people to be given money in return for their cadaver for medical schools in the U.S.
Right.
Just because sometimes we have to make a decision that there are some things you don't have a right to give away under duress, essentially. And financial stress is a type of duress. Mm-hmm. And a lot of ghostwriters are under financial stress and they're victimized. And I'm not saying that it should be right or it should be wrong, but I think it's worth this movie asking us, hey, how do you feel about the concept of ghostwriting? Because to be honest, if you totally think a ghostwriter has no rights as a ghostwriter, well, Bill Finger falls under that category. He understood that he was ghostwriting these things at the time.
Right, but Bill Finger didn't understand, because how could you possibly know that in the 30s something that you wrote that was for children was going to explode like this?
And that's exactly why I don't think you should have the ability to give up all that credit, because you don't know. I mean, you don't know what the heck you're creating, what it might have.
But hold on.
Okay.
Because the difference between what my friend did for Sweet Valley High versus what Bill Finger did is that Bill Finger put a lot of creative work into that work. Like some of his best ideas are in Batman. Some of his best ideas are in, the other things that he ghost wrote for. Me and my friend, when we have ghost written things, we know going into it, we are not going to put our own creative ideas into this thing. We are literally just moving the boulder along to, make some money. And so that's the difference between Bill and me and my friend, is that we know going into it, we are not going to put in a single original idea into this thing. We are literally going to write out what they're asking us to do, and no more and no less than that. And that's the difference
on your resume for ghostwriting. I promise not to put 100% effort into my ghostwriting.
No. But you know that going into it, and they know it too. I mean, they know it also.
Yeah. But well, here's the one thing. It's clear Bob Kane isn't going to be able to write. He can't write. It's just not what he does. In fact, I will argue that you look at his drawings, they're not above average for any other Golden Age drawings. It was Bill Finger that brought all the value. But if Bill Finger wasn't willing to ghostwrite it, somebody else would have.
Right.
There's no way. And even though it's new, and you can, like you said, there's no way for Bill Finger had ghost written other stuff for Bob Kane, and he really didn't lose anything. He may have made more money than Kane did by at least getting the guaranteed paycheck, Yeah. So going into this, to him, this is another Rusty and Clip Carson. And he thinks, okay, so I'm going to make this the best I can for Bob over there, and he doesn't know it's going to take off. But it still raises a question, because there's so much you can't know. There are lots of new media coming out every day. There are new things out there that people are, especially, the economy's tough. There are people needing that extra $250. And when I'm talking about ghostwriting, there are folks that ghostwrite for $250, something that might become wildly popular. And it's just, to me as a consumer, I feel deceived.
You know who never got a ghostwriter for anything? It's hard to believe. R.L. Stine.
I thought you were going to say ghostwriter never had a ghostwriter.
No kidding. No. R.L. Stine wrote, he did an AMA on Reddit a couple years ago. He wrote every one of them books, man. All of those things that are out there, he wrote all of them.
He's good at Goosebumps, but he is not a good Man-Thing writer. I'll tell you that right now. That current miniseries is bad.
That's good, huh?
But as a consumer, it's kind of like the idea, if you're going to buy food, you kind of have a right to sort of know what's in it. And I think that extends to art a little bit. I think if an artist, whether it's a writer or a painter, I think if a painter is just signing his name to something he didn't paint, I kind of feel like I have the right to know that when I buy it.
This is
well. Then I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. That William Shatner series, Tech War.
You wrote it?
None of that was written by William Shatner. Just so you
I thought you were going to tell me you wrote it, and then I was going to go buy it.
No. By the time that like people were hiring me for some of that stuff, like that stuff is gone. Like that stuff's done.
I'll let you in on a secret. Some of the stuff I've written, I wish I didn't. I wish that I could blame it on a ghostwriter.
Me too. On this very show sometimes.
I was a member of the William Shatner DVD Club. I'm not proud of it. It folded
the funny
so
thing
fast.
is, it makes me far more likely to buy those Tech Wars books knowing that they were ghostwritten.
And Bruce, I'll end this. I'll end this this discussion. It's not even an argument. This discussion with this. You know, I can totally see your point on this. I really do. I see why. Where you're coming from with all this. I think that, you know, you are right to a certain degree. I think that it's disingenuous to think that William Shatner wrote all of Tech War. But you know, there's you know, I'm also looking at it from the vantage point of, you know, sometimes you sometimes that's the only work you can get when you're new, is that you write and you write these things.
There is this kind of, I don't want to call it sketchy, but inconsistent history of sometimes courts deciding ghostwriters have rights and sometimes deciding they don't. And it's inconsistent how it's applied. It doesn't make sense. It's kind of like, I think it would be better just to say, you know what? Let's let the consumer know what they're getting. And this is just, you know, consider this. It's not the ultimate answer, but you can say, you know what? Let the consumer know what they're buying, or else you know, I kind of come down on the consumer for this in a lot of ways. I'll be honest. And I also come down on the creators, because I feel like a lot of people get pushed over by this. And I also kind of hate marketers, and a whole lot of people in the indie publishing world are guys that think, or ladies that really think they've cracked marketing, don't know how to write. And you can go on like the writing equivalent of Fiverr and just hire someone to write you a story, hire someone to make you a cover. You put your name on it. You sell it the same way I'm selling my books, but because you kind of know how to play the game, you're making $5,000 or $6,000 from something you invested about $1,500 in. And it's really just like flipping real estate. I mean, and that kind of bugs me.
So that's F-I-V.
Yeah, and it should.
Yeah. And you know what? Even if you don't want to say ethical or legal, I think I want to call on some people to ask themselves morally, how do they feel about it? And that way, at least it can be an individual decision. But I really think more people need to kind of think, both consumers and creators, do I feel like I want to know what rules we're using here? I mean, you don't really get ghost surgeons in my line of work. I'd love it if I could contract somebody to do all my work for me. You know, I could get somebody from, you know, a third world country where they're a wonderful surgeon, but the economy's weaker, so I could just pay them half of what I would get paid. And then I sit home all day, they do all my surgery, and then I show up in the post-op and shake hands and say, aren't you glad I did such a wonderful job on your surgery? Go tell your friends.
I
get sued for malpractice,
by the way, add another character to the Leslie verse. Ghost surgeon.
I love it.
There's only one ghost. The only thing I've seen ghosts do is really just make pottery. Outside of that, I don't know that they can do a whole heck of a lot more. They have to have Demi Moore.
So your experience is just limited to Demi Moore movies.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it though. I sign all the paperwork. I sign the op note. I sign all the charts. There's no physical record unless you've got an eyewitness that this other guy did the surgery. Eyewitness, get it? Pun.
You know,
cataract surgery.
Whoopi was great in that movie.
I want ghost bus drivers to be a thing. Where a bus driver hires somebody else to take his shift because he's too drunk to take it that day.
Ghost bus drivers!
You have to wear my ID badge. You have to tell everybody that asks that you're me. But there's no way I'm driving that bus today. You don't have a license? Here's a book that tells you how it works.
Every 6.5
Carry
blocks,
my ID.
just start screaming.
A ghost.
Or a ghost dad. Imagine that concept.
Good gosh. All right. Before the show goes any further off the rails, we have to take the time out of our day to find out how this documentary relates back to our good friend Sylvester Stallone. Good luck.
Good luck, Sean.
No, this was an easy one, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement. Man, DC Comics sure screwed over Bill Finger, and so did its parent company, Warner Brothers Entertainment. You know who else Warner Brothers screwed over? Sylvester Stallone, because Stallone is everywhere. And in this year of our Lord 2017, Sylvester Stallone filed the lawsuit against Time Warner for fraud claims against the studio. The lawsuit is specifically about the accounting practices of Demolition Man, a movie that made about $58 million while in the movie theaters, but made way more than that in home video sales. If any of you are thinking about taking the studio's side in all this, remember that Demolition Man was released in 1993, and Warner Brothers had 25 years to correct their, quote, accounting error, unquote, but did nothing. Yes, Stallone is a multimillionaire. Yes, he isn't exactly the perfect face for helping others in the creative community, but it's his money and he deserves it. You're not going to make Demolition Man in 1993 without Stallone, and he needs to be compensated for that. Warner Brothers was first claiming that Demolition Man actually lost money, which is so angering it makes me want to make a documentary about a guy no one's ever really heard of before named Sylvester Stallone. And then I will make myself the subject of heroism. Warner Brothers actually changed their tune when pressed about the situation from Stallone's lawyers. Then they sent him a check for $2 million. And yeah, that's a lot of money. But how do you go from that movie lost money to here's $2 million? And Stallone is rightfully and righteously tired of studios' shady accounting practices. And here's what I think. Stallone is the perfect guy to pick up this cause because he doesn't need the money. He's high profile enough to get eyeballs on this, and he's been in the studio system long enough that he's actually going to have a few executives take his side. Stallone is 70 years old, and while he started as the common man done good, he turned into something else for a while, and his second act looks like a passion play that could be called "With Great Power Comes Great Opportunity to Act Like a Massive Douchebag." But his third act has turned him into a person who knows that mistakes were made, and he's trying to become a better person, build a better machine. And here's a tip if you're trying to get on my good side. To me, there's no better person you can meet and befriend than a man or woman who was broken and has mended themselves. And I surround myself with people like this because no one has more patience, are stronger willed, have more good knowledge, and have good advice than someone who has been there and knows what you're going through and has truly mended and fixed whatever problem they might have had. Bruce Leslie is one of those people, as is Adam Portrais, although he's not completely fixed yet, but he's getting there, and he will be there. He will get there. If Bruce and I have to beat him in the back alley of the Charlotte Convention Center at HeroesCon this summer, he will get there. You might want to stick around to see that. Maybe Bruce and I could sell tickets. 2 bits of candy. And HMPers, that's this week's Stallone connection. I know this one was not funny, but this is a subject matter that makes me very, very angry indeed. Now, Tom DeFalco and Carmen Infantino, let's review this movie so we can create our own universe, or at the very least, help Bruce ghostwrite his.
We're going to each ghostwrite a chapter and not tell people which one it is and see if they can pick it out.
That would be fun because they would know instantly. See, it's fun if you say, even if you just say one chapter of this was ghostwritten, figured out, that's at least honest.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There you go. That works for me.
Or even just by Bruce Leslie with a ghostwriter who shall remain nameless. At least, some kind of honesty there. But real quick, I don't want to get us sidetracked. Neither of you may know the answer to this, but I'm just curious if either of you know, does the Screenwriters Guild have a stance about a guild member taking credit for writing a script that was actually written by a non-guild member?
Whew.
I don't know.
I feel like the guild would be very anti-ghostwriting, especially if it was funneling money to a non-guild writer. And the guild writer was getting credit for it, because I could really see this cottage industry, or somebody who's a member of the guild, finding people that can't quite get there, can't get that break, and they're saying, "Hey, I'll give you a little bit of money for this script, and I can actually sell it." I just wonder if there's something like that that goes on that's probably has to be kept ultra quiet because it's against the rules, I suspect.
I'll still say
I can tell you, Orson Welles got into a ton of trouble for Citizen Kane when he took the credit for the writing of Citizen Kane, but the guy he took the credit from was also a guild member, so I'm not sure.
Hey, same story with Paul Hogan for Crocodile Dundee 3, and I'm not making a joke.
No, I know. I remember.
They used to show clips on PBS.
That guy went on to become like the world's richest fantasy sports analyst, which is weird. That whole story is weird. Okay, my rating. That's what we're supposed to be doing here.
Bruce, where does Batman and Bill fall on the Robin rating system for you, sir? And if you don't know what that is, everybody, you can go to facebook.com/Hero Movie Podcast right there at the top of the screen. Bruce, go.
Bill Finger will always get a Dick Grayson because he created Dick Grayson. So that's the only Robin he created. So he gets the Dick Grayson. However, a lot of the decisions made around this movie get a Jason Todd for me, but that is not meant to reflect at all on how I feel about Bill Finger. So Bill Finger deserves a Dick Grayson. If you don't know who Bill Finger is, watch the first 30 minutes of this and then think about what I said as you watch the last parts. But I will give Bill Finger a Dick Grayson all day long, but because I don't think that this movie gave Bill Finger what he deserved, that's why I'm rating this movie lowly. So Jason Todd for everything that isn't just letting people know about the wonderful things Bill Finger did.
Also, Keenan.
I have a different perspective on this than Bruce does, clearly. But it's even with that being said, even with them making their own narrative in this movie, and it's a creative narrative to be sure, it's still not a very good documentary. It lags at points for something that we are very, very interested in. Think about the people who know nothing about Batman or Bill Finger and don't necessarily care. Is it going to keep them interested in this? No, because it gets boring, and it gets boring fast. For me, it's going to be a Damian Wayne.
Okay, good. Because I thought you were probably going to go a little bit lower, because mine's exactly at Damian Wayne too. It's not terrible. I mean, if you really have no background in Batman at all, it will be very entertaining, and informative to you for sure. Now, I think, like we said, I think a lot of our ilk kind of know that sort of stuff and have known, Bill Fingers specifically for a long, long time. So, but it is odd seeing it in the movie as like, hey, this is the kind of thing that he's doing. It's his kind of justice. And I did like, at least from the onset watching it, I like the idea that it's like, oh, well, I think it felt like, don't we already know that it's Bill Finger? I think everybody already knows that. They set up the straw man there with the Comic-Con, but whatever. But then he's like, oh, well, this was just to show him wanting to get the credit in there. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a clever turn, hide the secondary documentary right after the first little mini one there. Perfect. And then it turns out that that's not really the case either. And it just seems like it was a bunch of, all leading up to watching him shedding a tear when Batman v Superman comes on the screen, which I'll be honest, I did smile when that came up in the theater because I knew, it'd gone through the grapevine, hey, this is the first time Bill Finger's going to get his due and everything. I thought it was pretty sweet. Made me smile in the theater. I'm like, wow, it's taken this long. That's a darn shame that it's taken as long as it has. But, just to really make him out to be the real king of this thing, I understand where Bruce is coming from, thinking, he's got to have a large hand in it. I'm sure he had something, but I leave it only to the people that really know nothing about the situation, or if you're just curious enough at it. It's on Hulu right now, so if you're paying for Hulu, it's worth a shot,
But it's a documentary about Bill Finger that fails to mention he's in 2 separate comic book halls of fame, fails to mention that he's got a really, really major award named in his honor for the best. It really fails to, like, if this were a Wikipedia entry, it would be an awful one. You know what I mean? They leave some facts out. No,
and here's the thing. Not to say that doesn't happen over time where somebody will come back and make a really, in 5 years, make another Bill Finger documentary that's actually good, I mean, I
would love to see a Ken Burns-style Bill Finger documentary where the filmmaker was totally out of it and we could just talk about the awesome stuff Bill Finger's done. I would love that.
There you go.
That would be great.
You got it, Kenny Burns. I saw him do a big lecture live and everything. That's an intriguing older gentleman. I was going to say young man, but he ain't that young. He just has that big giant mop head.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder why he gets the same haircut Pete Rose has.
It's quite
same
bizarre.
barber. Easy.
They're both up to their neck in gambling debts. All right, that is it, everybody. Join us next week when we don't know what we're talking about yet because our winner of Patreon did not send us his thing yet. I'm going to message him once we're done with this so we can get on that ASAP. But as of right now, it's a little bit of a mystery here. Well,
I think it's going to be Thunderpants or whatever that movie was.
How about this? We decide right now which movie we're going to watch if this dude doesn't get back to us.
Oh, my goodness.
Let's do that.
That's like threatening the guy, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's not a threat. I mean, it just sounds, it's just a cool thing. Like, hey, if you don't show up, you don't show up.
Hold on, check this. I dig what you're saying here. And so, Sean, what we're going to do right now is we're going to give the people who actually don't subscribe to us on Patreon a little bit of a hint of what we do once these here, recorders go soft or silent, whatever. I don't know. Because they're still rolling. I say the young kids all love documentaries these days. Let's do another documentary next week. There is a Superman documentary that I do want to cover at some point that's actually pretty decent. It came out around the same time as Singer's
There's
Superman.
a pretty good documentary that PBS made, sort of Ken Burns style, but it's not Ken Burns, called Superheroes: A Never-Ending Battle that I liked. That is another documentary out there.
I feel like I've seen that. I don't recall.
Has a lot of interviews with Linda Carter, and she still looks good in her advanced age.
That's what we do. We do the pilot episode of Wonder Woman.
Honestly, that was on our calendar earlier, believe it or not, and we kind of shuffled it around because that honestly was what was going to be there. So
let's pencil it in then.
Gorgon Campy, if you don't get there, we're going to review a little bit of the Punisher. Where did my brain go? Ooh, all right, that says something about me, doesn't it? Wonder Woman. Which did have an element of the play in it, if you will. So maybe we'll talk about that next week. Maybe we won't. Who's to say? It's all up in the air. Until next week, Bruce, where can we find more of your work on the internet this week, sir?
Chubby Wizard, both the podcast and the book. Go to Amazon.com, look for my author page, look for Dragon in the Needles, look for Chubby Wizard, Wrath of the Manticore. It's all good stuff. It's all there. It's all cheap. Go check it out.
I love that. And Keenan.
Hey, if you're trying to find pictures of me on the internet, there's no reason to just snoop around. Just go to Hero Movie Sean at twitter.com. It's right there.
Yeah, I've got a photo on my author page if anybody wants to see what it looked like.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm the only Adam Portrais that's out there. You can if you can't find me, something's wrong with you. And why you would though? That also is something wrong with you. So there you have it. Yeah, that's it, everybody. So I don't know. Join us.
Kind of went off the rails at the end there. Sorry, everybody.
It's all good. Hey, like I said, that there, kids, is a taste of what we do before and after the show, but usually wrapped in a little something else. I don't know. We had an interesting pre-show today. So that is it, everybody. Thank you. Patreon month keeps going on. Again, thank you to all the people that go down to patreon.com/HMP. Throw a couple of shekels our way and everything. We still got a little bit more giveaway to go to. Oh, I did want to mention one. I'm sorry. I meant to do this earlier. We did get a huge Patreon add-on this week. I got to remember the gentleman's name. Give me half a second here. His name.
While you're vamping, while you're coming up with that, I'll start vamping. It's the Marty and EV, the Marty and EV show.
I don't even
Man,
know.
You noticed that we've already forgotten about the stingers for the Comic Book Connection.
No, we did not forget. One of us forgot.
I'm using
One
the
of us
royal we.
forgets every week and has some excuse to why my guitar was in the car.
He broke a string on his banjo.
I forget what music is.
Oh, the good news is I found my guitar. Bad news, don't have any picks in the house.
I've become functionally deaf. I'm sorry.
Oh, I played it. I just forgot to hit record. That's one of my favorites because I've done that before.
I had to go to a breakdancing competition.
Are we done yet?
Oh, the old colonoscopy didn't go as planned.
Carlton Gordon, thank you for your $40 pledge to the thing, my friend.
You are a saint among men, sir.
That is awesome.
What's his name?
Carlton Gordon.
Hats off to you, my man.
Nice gentleman. We'll send you out something there because at the $40 thing, I think you get a shirt. We'll figure it all out. That's it.
If I ever pull off that thing where I sue myself, you can be my attorney, sir.
Carlton Gordon, attorney at law. Bruce Leslie versus Dick Gunfighter. The parties have been sworn in. That is it, everybody. Join us next week for whatever the heck it is we end up doing. For Sean, Keenan, Bruce Leslie, I'm Adam Portrais. Stay super, everybody.
It's the Marty and Amy Show.
It's ridiculous.